It's lovely to be at camp again. Can I get the house lights up just so I can see who I'm looking at? Beautiful faces. 'Cause I can't see a thing. It's lovely to be at camp again. Actually, to be honest, I'm always a little bit anxious when I'm at camps, especially around tents. I'm just going to tell you a little story so you get used to my accent again. When I was camping with my family when I was 10 years old, my brother was 7, and he was a lot tougher than me because I'm skinny, obviously, and he's quite staunch, big. And we were having a fight because that's how we love each other on our holidays in Scotland. And I was being chased by him at this point, as usual. And we were running around this tent in our bare feet, and I was running, laughing because little staunch boy can't catch me. And this tent peg out of the ground went in between my big toe and the toe next to it and ripped back about maybe 2 to 3 centimeters and exposed it. And I went into shock. My brother didn't realize, he just kept on beating me up. So I'm always a little bit anxious around camps, but apart from that, it's great to be here. And it's been lovely to meet so many of you. I've been asked to speak on social justice issues in the wider world and the death of Jesus. Fun times. Basically, I've been asked to come here and depress you. Well, hopefully not, but maybe. So I'm just going to get started right in. Hopefully you've tuned into my accent now. Thanks, guys. Jesus is dead. I want you to imagine yourself as a follower during that Saturday long ago. I want you to imagine, again, Jesus just hanging there. The image is imprinted upon your mind. Christ beaten, Christ bruised, Christ bloodied. His body is distorted, his flesh is torn, his expressions desperate. Christ is humiliated. Christ is breathless, Christ is lifeless, the masterpiece is dead, Jesus is dead. The image is imprinted upon your mind. You can still picture him hanging there. Well, that was yesterday. A day love and hope still just remained, but this is today. A day hope and love don't even linger. No, all that's left on that vile cross is the dried blood, the shards of flesh, the piss and the crap, the stench of death. All that remains are these terrifying reminders of evil. Another day that commemorates humanity at its worst. Another day where all that's left to say is, God is surely dead. And we still often see days like that day. Days when it seems that God is dead. I have a friend called Stephen, who's a Roscoe boy, and he moved a couple of years ago to Uganda in Central Africa to work with children who are running away from war in neighboring countries like the Congo. As he began working with a lot of these refugee children, he started meeting orphans, kids who've lost their parents or their parents have been killed. Orphans who were found sleeping outside schools, in churches, in strangers' kitchens. Kids who basically had nowhere to go or no one to turn to. And most of Stephen's time has been about getting alongside and helping a lot of these children. That's what my mate is up to in Central Africa. So not long ago, I log on to my Gmail account. And my email has again received the usual spam stuff, offers for improving my sex life and so on. My email has again received the usual billing stuff, overdue bills from 2 Degrees Mobile and so on. And my email has again received the usual family stuff. Mum asking, Paul, are you alive? Paul, are you well? Paul, are you washing properly? And so on. And then there's this other email, this email from Stephen. This email was different from his usual emails in that it had pictures attached. There had been this tribal massacre not far from where he was staying. A group angry for attacks on their people had decided to make a revenge-fueled statement on another group and had gone to a nearby uninvolved village and indiscriminately caused hell on earth, slaying whoever was in their path. Some photos were taken a short while after the massacre. Photos now accompanying my spam and bills and family emails. It's one thing to read stories about this stuff. It's another thing to see very graphic real-life photos related to this stuff. Picture after picture after picture of murder, of death. Cut-up woman here, sliced boy there, macheted father here, slain girl there. There's a hand hacked off, a breast sliced, intestine cut out, a face dug into, on and on. There are photos of all these massacred children. Children that are similar ages and who look similar to so many of the refugee kids in our neighborhood in Auckland. Kids who should be playing soccer. Kids who should be playing basketball or climbing trees or enjoying school or not enjoying school, or who should be pestering neighbors like me to have a play of the Xbox again. Kids who have a right to be safe, to learn and play and, not be slaughtered. I scroll down through the photos that are sent and they just become brutal, or more brutal. Scrolling down, there's this baby. I'm not going to show it, it stuffed me up, but there's this baby. A little girl, a year old maybe. She has the same beautiful, thick, dark hair that you often see on little African girls. Just like the African girls on our street. But her face, you can't see her face because someone has taken a machete and sliced down and through the whole front of her face. And it's brutal. There's part of a nose, there's no mouth though, just the inside of the mouth. You can make out some of the teeth and the jawbone, which is still almost impossible to make sense of in light of the tissue and the vein and all the stuff that's just too exposed. This is an innocent baby. And to this baby, the murderer has had a second go, slicing on down through the body, cutting through her cute pink and purple t-shirt, causing her insides to now dribble onto the ground where she lies in this disturbingly helpless fetal position. A baby macheted. And you go down to the next photo. Lying next to the baby is this little girl, her older sister probably, with these once big, beautiful eyes, and picture after picture after picture. Mothers and family, fathers and brothers and sisters, family after family after family after family. And of course, none of the photos convey the horror or the pain of those last moments. In a part of our world too often known for utilizing brutality and rape as tools of war, none of it conveys the real evil-filled moments before their death. They don't convey that true emotion, but they display enough. They publicize evil's works enough. It's estimated that 1,500 people in our world are killed every day in armed conflict. Every day. Horrifying reminders of evil. Events that commemorate humanity at its worst. Realities that lead us to state, God is surely dead. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine offered me a free month-long trip to Cambodia, to which I, as a very happy Scotsman, free, accepted. About the time I was preparing to go, I was reading this book called Half the Sky, a book about global human rights issues regarding women. The book begins with some stories of some women who have been trafficked. You can actually find more about it out in the village, one of the tents there. Forced into sexual slavery among countries like Cambodia. One of the early stories is shared of a young teenage Cambodian girl called Wrath. Like many Cambodian children born into extreme poverty, she is forced to find work away from her village in order to help support the family. As a young teenager, she is approached, as many young girls are, by some people who offer her a good-paying job in the city far away. in this case, a Thai restaurant. It's, of course, a deception, one that leads her and her friends to be taken off and forced into sexual slavery. Her story is one of hell. Instead of me kind of describing it emotionally, I just want to read one paragraph from the book. One paragraph. This is what it says about Wrath, this young girl. It says, Wrath and the young teenage girls were forced to work in the brothel 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. They were kept naked to make it more difficult for them to run away or to keep tips or other money. And they were forbidden to ask customers to use condoms. They were battered until they smiled constantly and simulated joy at the sight of customers because men would not pay as much for sex with girls with reddened eyes and haggard faces. The girls were never allowed out on the street or paid a penny for their work. They gave us food to eat, but they didn't give us much because the customers didn't like fat girls, said Wrath. On the story goes, only to then be followed by another story of another girl, only to be then followed by another story of another girl, only to be followed by another story of another girl. Girls that will more than likely contract a disease like AIDS, as so often happens, and die by the age of 19 or 20. Well, this story, which sucks, about Wrath from Cambodia, stuck with me as I got ready to go on my trip to Cambodia. A few weeks pass and we arrive in the country and go on this eye-opening, unplanned, off-the-beaten trip around the country. Heaps of beauty, heaps of laughs, and heaps of sadness, obviously. Near the end of our trip, we were pretty keen to chill out, so decided to go out one night for a beer and a game of pool. It's one thing to read stories about these girls, it's another thing to be walking down the street while being offered services by such desperate young women with their painted-on smiles. One of the strongest memories I have is when my friend and I found this small bar with a pool table. In we go, we buy a drink, and instantly 3 Cambodian women surround us. And it's their job to keep us in the bar buying more alcohol or maybe even time with them. That's their job. We explain we're just having 1 or 2 drinks and a game of pool. And so they ask if they can play pool against us for fun. And of course we say yes. And they go on to absolutely thrash us. But one of the 3 women was really young. At the very most 16, I'm guessing on the younger side of 15 years old. 15. The part of the evening that really stuck with me, it was midway through the game, just as she was lining up her shot, and she was still laughing at the awful mishit of my friend, the reality of her situation just hit me. She dresses like a 15-year-old. She laughs and she jokes and talks fast like a 15-year-old. She plays pool like a 15-year-old. But she doesn't have the freedoms or the options or the dreams or the hopes of any 15-year-old I know, of any 15-year-old here today. She doesn't get to ask, what shall I study this year? She doesn't get to ask, what shall I get up to this weekend? What band shall I go watch? What sport should I play? Shall I go to camp this year or not? Her hopes, if she has any, are probably limited to hoping that she won't get a sexually transmitted infection, that she won't get an aggressive or violent customer, that she'll make enough money to make her pimp happy, or if she's lucky enough to not have a pimp, that she'll make enough to make her week less of a struggle. This young girl, like the young woman Wrath from that book, and like the many before her, and like the many after her, has a life of being forced into work that no child, no teen, far less no person should ever be forced into. This year alone, 1 million new girls, 1 million new girls, like Wrath, will be sexually exploited as slaves, and they will join the millions of young women for whom this is already a reality in our world. Horrifying reminders of evil. Realities that commemorate humanity at its worst. Reality that lead us to state, God is surely dead. Last story coming up. My wife, who I love, my wife, she lived and worked for quite a long season in southern India as a lawyer. She worked with an organization that worked to free people from modern-day slavery. The first time I met my wife, we caught up for a coffee. I told her I wanted to hear her story. That, by the way, guys, is a great way to get a girl out for a drink. I want to hear your story. Just not with the creepy facial expressions I just did, because that'll probably freak any girl out. Who does that? It's the hand-waving thing. Anyway, anyhow, we went out for a coffee. And she shared parts of her time working overseas. She shared some stories. The story that I remember vividly when I wasn't trying to hit on her was this one about a rice mill. Actually broke me a little bit, but was the story of this rice mill that the team she was with busted. The story goes that they get a report of a rural rice mill using a type of slavery called bonded labor. Within this particular mill, there was 4 generations of family. There was young children, their parents, their grandparents, and their great-grandparents. Generations back, a couple had become slaves in the mill, only to find themselves in a work situation they could not work out of. Only to find themselves having children in the mill who then had to work. Only to find themselves having children in the mill who then had to work. Only to find themselves having children who would soon have to work. Generations of one family forced to work. They weren't paid. They weren't allowed to leave. There was a constant threat of being beaten. If they did try to escape or didn't work hard enough, they were hurt. They were enslaved. For many, this work in this rice mill was all they'd ever known. Process the rice, pack the rice, eat a bit of rice, sleep. Process the rice, pack the rice, eat a bit of rice, sleep. Process the rice, pack the rice, eat a bit of rice, sleep. Process rice, pack rice, get a beating because you aren't working hard enough. Sleep. No health care, no rest day, no way out, just work a bit, eat a bit, sleep a bit, work. And when my wife Anna and the team she was with arrived, they began to search for and identify those who'd been enslaved. They began to take testimonies, write reports, organize the counselors and the follow-up and so on. They all had to wait while officials interviewed each of the slaves, each of the people. Anna wanted to keep the young children settled. And so she'd come with what every child loves, or what every child I've ever known loves. She'd come with crayons and some paper, knowing there would be kids there. So Anna gives some crayons to this little group of girls, and while explaining in the Tamil language that they're allowed to play with the crayons. They don't seem to understand, so they just stare at her. So Anna tries explaining by using actions, trying to explain, you can play with the crayons. Still, they're pretty blank and don't understand. So Anna gets one of the women who spoke a different Indian language to try explaining. Still nothing. It wasn't that they couldn't understand the language. It's just that they'd never, ever seen a crayon or paper before. Girls as old as 12 who had no clue as to what drawing or coloring in was about. Oh, the kids know work. They know rice. They know the rice that sits on the shelves in our supermarkets. And they know fear. They know their parents' fear. They just don't know crayons. They don't know freedom. They don't know creative expression or the privilege of education or of rest or of family fun. They know work, just not crayons. And while the beauty of that story is that that family was freed and empowered, the tragedy is that over 27 million people are still enslaved like that today. Over 27 million. Too many that will likely never taste freedom, only fear, violence, and work. Horrifying reminders of evil. Realities that commemorate humanity at its worst. Realities that lead us to state, God is surely dead. A world of conflict and enslavement, a world of suffering and of fear, a world where it appears that God is dead. It was into that type of world, with those types of issues, that Jesus entered. Into a time and a land and society rife with poverty and conflict and injustice. Jesus was not born into a comfortable neighborhood, able to live a comfortable life. Jesus wasn't born into an area that was risk-free or issue-free or pain-free. No, he came to a time and a place that shared those sorts of issues. A place where greed and corruption were common, a place where poverty and famine were common, a place where conflict, violence, slavery, and injustice were common, a place where people felt so often hopeless and where people felt so often prayerless, who too often stated, God is surely dead. Another child killed, God's dead. Another family enslaved, God's dead. Another woman trafficked, God is dead. It was into that type of world with those issues that Jesus entered. But, this is the beauty of it, but it is into that type of world that he still lived full of faith and love. A life that believed so passionately in God's love for himself and believed so passionately for this world that suffers. In a world where God in love seemed dead, Jesus lived life as if a God of love was alive. We see this belief dictating Christ's actions as he gives his everything to heal the unhealed, to accept the unaccepted, to recognize the unrecognized, to speak for the voiceless, to stand for the beaten. We see this belief dictating his life as he gives his everything to proclaim good news to the poor, proclaim freedom to the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, as the gospel tells us. We see Jesus, out of God's deep love, giving everything he's got to see an end to the issues that hurt and harm people and places, to see an end to conflict, to see an end to trafficking, to see an end to enslavement, to see our world instead defined by God's love and peace and celebration. Jesus came talking this and walking this, even suffering because of this. That is how he lived, filled with the belief that God of love was alive. But we don't only see this belief in his life, we see it in his death. Everyone wants to talk about the resurrection. Rightly so. Everyone wants to talk about the miracle of the resurrection, but do not miss the miracle that is the way Christ lived and died. We witness this miraculous belief in the God of love being with him and working with him as he loves and forgives the very murderers who now nail him to the murder weapon. As he loves and offers hope to the hopeless case being crucified on the cross next to him. As he loves and gifts mercy to all those who shout and act violently toward him. In the way Jesus lived and died, we see someone who believed in something or someone bigger than himself. Who believed that the love of God could and would overcome someday. Who believed that a life of love changes hearts and can change a world. The very same life-altering holy love that sees people like my friend Stephen move in faith for orphaned kids in places like the Congo. That sees people like my wife Anna move in faith for enslaved families in India. That sees a myriad of Jesus followers like Freeset, who make these t-shirts, move in faith for trafficked women in Asia. You know, we live, almost done, we live in a world that too often appears to have just faithlessly given up. When you really think about these stories, that is filled with people that seem to have thrown in the towel, hopelessly stating that a God of love is dead and hope with it. But Jesus, and how he lived among a world of great suffering, and Jesus, and how he chooses to die still loving a pained world, causes us to wonder that perhaps there's a very different truth. That God is very much alive, very hopeful still, and active even among the pain, calling his people to give their lives, to give their futures even for the sake of loving people and places back to life. There is this famous quote, really short, famous quote that sums up much of the problem in our world. It states, "All it takes for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing." You know what? Jesus, I reckon, agrees, but he would add that all it takes for love to triumph is for good people, God's people, to do something. Where do you stand among a world that suffers? I know a lot of you are young and you're beginning on this journey of following Jesus, but when you're faced with stories or situations like these, when you have to think about painful and hopeless realities, does it cause you to give up and run? Or does love fill you with a desire to want to get involved? Do you know Christ? And the love that he knew so well, that when you see situations that cause people to state, well, surely God's dead, you instead believingly state, no, this is surely where God wants us to be involved. No, this is surely where God wants us to move to. No, this is surely where God wants us to serve. No, this is surely where we're to give our all for. Even if it costs us everything. Our world, through its suffering, our world, through its injustice, screams too often that God is dead, that love is dead, that hope is dead. Jesus rejects that. Jesus calls you to reject that. He calls you to live and love in a way that screams back to a pained world, God is alive, that declares to a world in need of hope, God is alive. I'm going to pray. And I'm going to pray it's quite heavy stuff to say the least. I'm going to pray an old Franciscan prayer over your lives. And then I'll let the worship team come up and lead us on. So if you can just bow your heads if this has meant anything to you, and I'll just pray this over us all. May God bless you with this comfort at easy answers and half-truths, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with the anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may give your lives for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. May God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. And may the blessing of God, who creates, redeems, and sanctifies, be upon you this day and forevermore. Amen. Go well.